I've got laryngitis or something.
yeah.
I can't fucking talk.
So wash your mic after.
We
Never washing that mic again.
Where's it been before? Is my question.
Wonderful places. Yeah.
Let's give it a rub down just in case. Don't want to get cross.
All right. Well, we got Calf of Happy Mondays fame, and also new band Blitz Vega with his bandmate, the one and the only, the legendary Andy Rourke of the Smiths and many other things.
Yes.
And Sean Ulbs here with Tera Lisicky for the Bring It Backwards podcast. And how's it going, guys?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
So, I know I always forget to grab the microphone too.
Great.
I'm glad you guys appreciate the IPAs. So cheers. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Cheers.
Kath and I had a chance to talk a little bit outside. So I guess we can just start from the beginning. You guys are both Brits. What part of Britain did you guys grow up in? And maybe tell us a little bit about the childhood.
I grew up in a place called Leicester, which is right in the middle of England.
But we realise people won't know what Leicester is, and you have to say Leicester.
Yeah. So people do say Leicester.
Okay. That's how it's spelt if you were to look it up.
Exactly. And
Right.
this is the thing, you see. Because I suppose in the US, you guys actually pronounce things how they're
Literally.
spelled.
Right. We try, yeah.
Which is
Most words.
we pronounce things a little bit differently.
Your own way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, for example, there's a street in the world famous city of Leicester called Beaver Street, and it's one of the main streets that runs through the town centre. And so, but it's spelt Belvoir. Belvoii.
Oh, wow.
Sounds kind of like
Street.
French.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
French. But over time, the Leicesterians have renamed it Beaver Street.
Okay.
And so that
Got
gives
it.
you an idea of
Unfortunately.
my hometown, which is a
Sure.
lovely place. I love it
Not
with
much.
all my
Not
heart.
much different here. We're in Los Angeles. If you were, that's a Spanish word. That would be Los Angeles, but we made it Los Angeles.
Like Los Feliz.
Right? And
Well,
people call it
right.
Los Feliz, or
Yeah.
it would be Los Feliz in
Los
Spanish.
Feliz, that's
yeah.
how people would say it.
Right.
But you say Los Feliz, yeah.
Sure.
But
you guys do a number on it.
yeah,
Beaver
yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
That's just another level. That's the same thing as like a rubber.
Yeah.
As in the rubber, the eraser. You guys call it an eraser.
Yeah.
And the other day,
A
I can't
rubber
remember
is
where
a
we
condom.
were,
Yeah.
but somebody actually pulled out a rubber. As in,
A condom or
no,
an
the
eraser?
eraser.
Right.
And they pulled it out, and they were like, doing a rubbing thing, getting rid of, something they'd write in pencil. And so I was like, wow. Oh, no, it's the drummer, Craig. It was Craig, our drummer.
because he's always
He's
taking
got
his
like
notes.
a little, he's got his notes, and he writes everything down with pencils and stuff, and he's got a eraser, but we always called it a rubber.
Right. Yeah, it's
So
funny.
can you
Funny how the
imagine
slangs. Yeah.
confusion Where when we ended up being
Yeah.
based over here. I mean,
Things,
there's all kinds
things
of
get lost in
embarrassing moments.
translation.
Sure.
Basil,
Right.
tomato.
Tomato.
Exactly.
Potato.
But, there you go.
And
all the obvious
Andy,
ones.
you're from Manchester, or
I am, yeah.
Okay. You remember where you you heard music? Maybe your parents were playing music, or an uncle, or someone you admired.
Okay.
One of those first times that you heard music, and you're like, okay, this is something that I am passionate about, or could be passionate about.
Okay. So, like 100%, I think, when you're a kid growing up, you delve into like your parents' LPs.
Right.
And they didn't have many. My dad, didn't really care about music. My mum was more passionate. So we had the Carpenters. We had the Beach Boys.
Nice.
We had the Beatles.
Of course.
Burt Bacharach. And so I was like, I kind of used to kind of rock out to that.
Right. And was the guitar? The guitar was your first instrument, or did you have anything that you started playing right before the guitar?
Well, ever since I was a kid, like I used to like for Christmas or birthdays, I used to order a musical instrument.
Like a different one every
I
time?
used to get like a plastic trumpet, plastic saxophone, plastic, and then I think when I was 11, I don't know. Anyway, 10, 11, because I had a plastic guitar, and I demanded a real guitar.
I think I've heard this story. Yeah, so you got a plastic guitar, and you're kind of.
I was like, no, this is no good.
And then you got a wood guitar. Like the following year, maybe, or like a few months later?
Because
or your birthday.
Yeah, Christmas is because my birthday is in January, so so kind of like smashed the plastic guitar, and I was like, what do you want for your birthday? I was like, a real guitar, and I finally got one, and my father's secretary's daughter happened to know how to play it. She knew like 2-3 chords, and so she kind of showed me the ropes, if you
remember
like.
What chords they were? Like a G and a C.
E, A, D,
Nice.
and she taught me the songs, The Streets of London and Dirty Old Town.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting my first guitar. My cousin showed me like 3 chords. He showed me like C, G, and I think D. And I was like, so I forever know those chords the best.
Yeah.
So, Cav, what about you? Some early musical memories?
Yeah, my aunt left her vinyl collection at my parents' place. She was moving countries at the time, I think, and so she left her record collection there, and I was like 6 or 7 years old, so after school I would go back, and my granddad would pick me up and take me home, and he didn't know that my parents had basically told me I couldn't touch the record player that was in the living room. So I'd basically put Sgt. Pepper on and
Nice.
Dark Side of the Moon.
How old were you about this time?
6, 7 years old.
Oh, okay, wow.
So Sgt. Pepper blew my mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely at that age, and it just took.
I think
over
it blew everybody's mind at whatever age.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. So.
But that's wild. That kid, so you're kindergarten, first grade, and you're just
I was
being
the kid
blown
who
by
was always going on
Sgt.
about
Pepper.
The Beatles, and everybody else was. I don't know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
But not what I was into. And then after that, bands like, I guess, Nirvana, massive for me. Actually, I've mentioned this a few times recently in interviews, but Guns N' Roses were a big deal for me as a kid.
Yeah.
Izzy Stradlin. That's one of the reasons why I picked up a guitar.
Yeah. One of the best hard rock bands of all time, I think.
Yeah. And then British bands like Oasis, which opened the door to me going back to bands like Happy Mondays, Stone Roses, Smiths.
Yeah.
And it kind of, that was it, really. But I knew as soon as I'd heard the Beatles, and the Stones. I mean, we're massive Stones fans.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Constantly connect on the Stones. When we're in the studio in the Stones, when we're in the Stones, which is kind of actually
in the Stones.
Sense
Talking about the Stones,
because when we're in the studio, we have a thing. We go, oh, we've gone a bit Stonesy.
Yeah, Stonesy.
I've gone a bit Stonesy again.
Have we gone too Stonesy?
We got too Stonesy. Right, quick, give me a loop. Give me an electronic loop.
Yeah.
We just can't help ourselves, can we?
No. And so...
I mean, if you're going to go a direction, that's pretty...
We go Beatlesy and Stonesy and, Small Facesy and, all over.
Neil Young is
Neil
a
Young.
huge influence.
Yeah.
Massive
We
influence.
go all over the place.
And we both love, although I guess we grew up in different generations, but we both have exactly the same music taste, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that kind of brought us together is our musical taste.
Sure.
And I thought that definitely I could be in a band with this guy because, we agree on everything, and there's no fucking fights and.
We do. It's a quite natural process, you know, working
Yeah.
together, and it's very enjoyable. And you know, obviously working with this guy is, you know, it's a big deal for me as well. I enjoy it a lot, and
Right.
you know, so.
So the name of the podcast is Bringing It Backwards. So we're trying to kind of go sequential here. So we heard a little bit about the early influences. You got your first guitar. You got your was it your aunt's record collection? You
Yeah,
said,
I did, yeah.
You get listen to some Sgt. Pepper. So I think most Smiths fans will know. You know, you and Johnny Marr. You know, you guys were in a band, and then Johnny went off and. Kind of decided with Morrissey that they're starting this band, and the first bassist didn't really work out, and he's like, well, I'm gonna phone up my bud Andy, and then you jump in the band, and
So you pretty much summed everything up
yeah.
there.
Was that an easy decision?
What more do you need to know?
So at that point you walk into this band. What were the first thoughts? Because I've heard I heard your radio show, one of your radio shows where you had Johnny Marr on, and you guys were kind of it was really great. You were talking to Johnny Marr, and it was really fun just listening to you guys, because you could tell you guys are childhood friends, and you're just talking about all these old great bands that you really.
I was on East Village Radio.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you guys were just kind of shooting it, talking about some of your old faves. And so how much did that play into kind of the sound of the Smiths, your guys' influences? Because I feel Morrissey definitely had he had a very unique kind of frontman vocal. As far as the music part goes, how did your influences play a part?
So me and Johnny, like, you know, we played together since we were like young kids, so it just seemed like a very natural thing, you know. Okay, like you said earlier, you know, I wasn't a part of the band initially.
Sure. Just for that first slip.
Yeah, for like a month,
month
or something. I don't know. And I was really upset about that, and then but I didn't tell anybody. But
right.
Anyway, so when Johnny called me, I was like, yeah,
like, finally.
Okay, yeah. And no, it was just everything just came together really naturally and organically, and yeah.
I think you guys were, you know, big band during the time of kind of punk rock and new wave. Your style is, I think, a little bit more, I think, eclectic at your bass style. You know, rather than a lot of your contemporaries had kind of that driving punk rhythm. I think you had a lot more variety in your bass. Who were you pulling from when you were doing that kind of playing?
Jaco Pastorius, for one. Mick Karn, who was definitely a massive influence on me, from Japan. Mm-hmm. I like Jack Bruce.
Okay.
McCartney, obviously.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
I can go on and on, you know. But sure. No, I was just like at that time. I was just like fucking soaking in everything, you know, and just, you know, trying to learn my craft and be the best at what I could do.
Right.
What is weird is like the first bass that I ever played was a bass that Johnny gave me, that he just like procured of somebody. It was and it happened to be a fretless bass.
Yeah.
And then and at that time we were listening to Japan. So then and became totally obsessed with like Mick Karn and God rest his soul. Yeah, I still to this day think he was a fucking genius. You know? And not only could he play amazing, but we went to see him play live a few times at the Manchester Apollo, and not only could he play amazing bass, he used to wear these Chinese slippers, and he just did like this shadow walk, like he wouldn't even move
little shuffle across, moonwalk across the stage in slippers, while playing. I think I've heard that, and I don't know a lot of people know that you learned bass. You know, like a kid picking up a bass and in a band.
I didn't have.
And it was
I never
fretless.
wanted to be a bass player. I felt like I was being demoted almost. But then when I actually got it in my hand and embraced it, I was like, I fucking like this. I could do this.
And good thing you did.
Thanks.
It's probably quite a big deal that it was a fretless bass.
Yeah,
as well.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
that made a huge kind of well, it was a big influence on your bass playing style, the way you kind of run down the fretboard and stuff like that.
It
may have been,
I think you're right.
Felt quite,
you get
restricted.
a bit more tuneful.
Do you think that maybe that influenced your style? I mean, like it's like when people talk about Jimi Hendrix, he was a lefty playing the guitar and the fretboard
100%
upside down to him, and so that's what gave him his unique style. You think that had anything to do with your style?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
A lot. Yeah.
And so Kaf, tell us a little bit about how you started playing music.
I just wanted to be in a band immediately. That's all I wanted to do. I just knew that I just wanted to, well, it was bass first, so I got a bass guitar, and it was an encore bass guitar, red and white encore bass. So I started on that, and I absolutely loved it. And then I decided for some reason that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try the guitar out. So then I exchanged it for like a really rubbish, kind of beaten up, rusty, kind of weird guitar that didn't really have a name. So I lost out because the encore bass was actually a lot more kind of, I think, worth a little bit more. But anyway, so then I got into the guitar and sort of learned 3 chords.
What was the motivation behind switching from bass to guitar? Do you remember?
I think Nirvana and also
so Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain, definitely, and also guitar players like Izzy Stradlin and people like that. Keith, Rolling Stones, were a big influence. So just seeing, I suppose, I didn't really know, but then I wanted to write songs. I was a songwriter before I was a musician, always. I'll always say that. Okay. I call myself a songwriter now rather than a musician. People ask me, I never say I'm a singer, generally. It's not a thing that I'd ever say because I just say, I'm a songwriter or I'm a musician, but I don't really say I'm a guitar player or a singer for whatever. I don't know why.
So
it's just been a thing from day one. So I think I just wanted to write songs straight away. So the guitar helped me write songs a lot easier than the bass did at the time.
Right.
So that's...
Andy, so the Smiths, it was like a shooting star, like 5 years of just epic music. And
it kind of...
And then
happened so quick.
Right. But I mean, like
so
many great things, it came to an end. Can you tell us just some of your favorite memories of On the Road, or maybe some of your funnies? I heard a story that like Morrissey used to have like some very like outlandish requests just to like kind of test the waters at certain gigs. Like you would request a tree. Be like a tree of a certain height be put in like the green room. Is that true?
I think that might be urban folklore.
Okay. That might have been folklore. Was there anything that similar? Any similar stories? Any On the Road with?
I mean, not really. I think the only thing that Morrissey was insistent about was it's like no meat anywhere, and. We all became vegetarian during the Smiths because Morrissey there was one time that I ordered when we were in America on one of the first American tours, and everybody ordered like scrambled eggs. Everyone eggs, and I ordered like the full American breakfast, the bacon sausage. And Morrissey just left the table.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and that was the first and last time we did that.
Okay.
But the trouble with everybody eating eggs and then getting on the tour bus. you can imagine.
A bunch of dudes after a bunch of eggs on a tour bus.
We were all like egg bound.
That's pretty awesome. You guys were, that you guys all adopted that diet at least for a little while. And
but
and then
it's a
you
good
kind of
thing.
taper off and go back to kind of the traditional diet afterwards?
I don't eat a lot of meat.
Don't eat a lot of meat.
No, just like occasionally, if I need like some protein for my diet and stuff like that.
Kath, maybe tell us a little bit about your first
diet.
Your first
I
band
can tell you about my
experience.
diet.
How
tell you
vegan
about-
are you?
Vegan?
Yeah.
I'm pretty vegan.
He's
Are you
fucking.
vegan?
He's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
super.
yeah.
He's super
I'm
healthy.
pretty much, well, kind of. I'm like a Jekyll and Hyde character, so I'm sort of kind of healthy, but then very healthy in some ways, and then in other ways not so healthy. But from a diet point of view, if we're talking about food,
I love food.
so I've been vegetarian for years.
Oh, great.
Since I was a kid, so I always had a thing about I just couldn't deal with meat.
Yeah.
I just didn't want it. So it wasn't like.
Was it like an experience, or did you?
I just didn't like it, like
didn't
the
like the
texture
taste
of
of
it,
it, yeah.
or anything, and then I realised what it was. So it was just one of those
So
things.
that was just.
And then
another motivating
and then
factor.
gradually now, I mean, I can't say I'm 100% vegan, but I'm pretty close.
Yeah.
And it's not like a
great.
trend thing. It's like actually living here in LA really helped me.
There's
a
so many
lot,
great
it's
vegan
great.
restaurants. Yeah. So many options.
So many options, and it was so difficult to go to restaurants in the UK at one point where you would have to, there would always just be one thing on the menu.
Sure.
Now I remember going to like kids' parties and stuff, and mums saying like, "Oh, just stick a bit of cheese in there for him. Stick a bit of cheese in there," and that's all I would get. So I'd just get like a cheese sandwich.
Right.
But anyway, there you go. So now you know about the diet, and
Now I'm hungry.
Yeah. So why don't you? I'd love to hear how. So eventually, you guys met at some point, and how did that meeting happen?
It happened. I was in a band from Leicester, where I'm from, and we were playing a few shows, and then we played Manchester, and the audience was full of people from like some of our favourite bands, New Order and Oasis, Stone Roses, The Smiths.
Manny actually invited me down to the show.
Manny from Stone Roses.
Yeah.
Nice.
Playing with Primal
Okay.
Scream at the time. So he was really good to us as a band then, and used to put us up at his place when we'd play in the north and stuff. So he was just really good to us, and he brought people like Andy down to the show. So that's when we first met, and then we sort of ran into each other every now and again at nights over the years. I had like a festival and party that Andy would play at in London, and then we bumped into each other backstage at Coachella.
I think that was like the main thing when we met again at Coachella, right?
Yeah. And so he just recently moved to New York, and I was like, I'd love to be in LA. And so a few months later, after I sort of stopped playing with the Happy Mondays, then I left London and came over to LA, and that was it. So
we were two expats, basically.
Yeah.
that's on different coasts.
Yeah.
But a few years later, then Andy came over to play my nights. I had these parties called Dance in a Panic here in downtown.
Sure.
And so Andy came to DJ, and we did like a Coachella warm-up party in the desert, and that was it. And we spoke about, I was like, Andy, would you come to the studio, mate? And he was like, yeah. So, and that was it. And then we realised we got on really well, and the music was very natural, and we just enjoyed the whole thing. So then we started Blitz Vega.
Was that something you guys had tossed around prior? Like, we should jam sometime, or we should get together, or was it at that point you were like, hey, I got some songs, I'd love to, to jam?
I think like Coachella was like
have a guest.
the main time that we said, oh, let's definitely do some work together.
Yeah, at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it really happened pretty recently, really, that we actually moved sort of, forward. So,
because like the last few years I was busy with the arcade thing with Dolores, and then that came to like a tragic full stop, and Yeah, I took like 6 months off after that. I didn't really know what to do, and then Cav gave me a call and said, "Let's do some work." And
Sure.
I thought it was like the perfect time to pick myself up again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's. I mean, you've done so many great things since the Smiths, though, right? I mean, you've worked with Sinead O'Connor, the singer from the Cranberries,
Dolores.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
You've the Pretenders. I mean, you've just worked with so many great artists since the Smiths. So I feel like you've had a great career post Smiths as well. And did
I'm not finished yet.
Yeah,
No.
for sure, obviously. And you did do some stuff with Morrissey after the Smiths, right? You did jump on some tracks, or
yeah, we did I think 4 or 5 songs. Yeah.
As time goes on, do you think I have to ask the obligatory question. As time goes on, do you feel like the chance of a Smiths reunion becomes more or less likely? Like, do the things that maybe were preventing it in the past become less important, so maybe it's becoming more likely, or do you feel like maybe people are drifting further apart and it's becoming less likely?
I just think it's never been likely, and then as years go by, between each separate member of the Smiths, it become because everybody's doing their own thing. It
Sure.
just becomes less and less likely.
Right.
And I don't think it would even be appropriate to revisit that. I think reunions are always terrible,
Sure. No, I know exactly what you mean.
and they always end in tears.
I think so. I think some people are. Yeah, some things are better left to the romance of the
we
past.
can do it for the money. We get $1
Sure,
million each.
sure. Yeah.
But no, I don't think that's
Yeah,
ever going to happen.
and I think I have a feeling that's why Robert Plant is kind of just like, let's not do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
Jimmy Page kind of wants to do it, but
Oh,
Robert
does it?
Plant's like, let's not. You know.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think that is the better way. End on a extremely high note for maybe that part of your life.
Yeah,
I
for
think
me,
it works for some bands, some bands it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of.
Yeah, it depends on where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like probably Guns N' Roses, people have mixed feelings. Some people are probably super stoked they get to see Guns N' Roses, and some people might think that maybe that was best left to the romanticism of their peak.
I was glad that they reformed because I wouldn't have seen them otherwise.
Sure,
'Cause
yeah,
I would have been
exactly.
way too young, so I saw them, at Coachella, and then saw them at the Dodgers Stadium,
Yeah.
which was,
And
although it was minus Izzy. If Izzy was there, then it would have been the perfect situation, but he didn't.
Right.
He didn't sort of play with them for whatever reason.
So I think we probably only have a few more minutes left, right?
Yes, Kate knocked on the door, so
Okay, so let's
carry on.
Let's talk just a little bit about Blitz Vega then, and I've been listening to the single, and it's great. I was talking with Calf outside, and it sounds like a lot of the rock and roll that I really like. Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, Iggy Pop, maybe Queens of the Stone Age, that kind of stuff. Kasabian maybe a little bit, and I've heard maybe a little bit of Kasabian in some of your old stuff too. And these are all bands that I really
Kasabian, I
love.
grew up with. Tom's one of my best friends, the lead singer of Kasabian.
Right.
So when I was doing like a lot of my early work as a wee lad, Tom would be in the studio as well. And actually Chris, the bass player from Kasabian, was my engineer on a lot of my very early demos. Actually, before they were Kasabian, they were a band called Syracuse back then. So we've kind of known each other since we were young guys. And
So
grew up in exactly the same circle and also into exactly the same bands. So there is that comparison, but
So same roots, yeah. You
it's
guys,
exactly
you
the
grew
same
from the
roots
same
and,
soil. Okay.
yeah, you can't dodge your roots,
you
can
can't
you?
dodge it. I saw Tom like 3 or 4 weeks ago, just before I came out here. And
Sure. So it sounds great. It's good old fashioned driving rock and roll, a little bit of punk rock in there. So it sounds great. I know you liked a lot of punk rock growing up, Andy. Is it fun to kind of be in a band that's a little bit more driving, a little bit more fast?
You know what? I actually didn't like punk rock when I was growing up.
Oh, really?
I was a complete hippie, and I used to get beaten up by the skinheads and the punk rockers.
Okay.
Because I was rocking out to Neil Young. And,
Okay.
and
That may have been more Johnny Marr than that I'm thinking of. Maybe it's
No, but
something.
he loves it. He loves the Stooges
No,
and
no,
pop and all the punk
like
stuff.
me and
yeah.
Johnny went to see
Yeah.
like Iggy a couple of times, and no, sorry, I got misled when you said growing up.
Right.
I was thinking
the early days.
Yeah, early
Sure,
days.
sure.
Yeah, I was.
So it's more something you
I was like this
started-
weird fucking hippie kid.
Well, it's good.
The
I think
people and when punk in 1977, they used to slap me around the face and knucklehead me and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Right. Did you guys ever think that maybe you guys were one of the forefathers of maybe emo music, even like in the 90s that came out,
No, I think that's impossible. You can't really see into the future, can
Right,
you?
right.
But definitely at the time we thought we had something special. We didn't
Sure.
know what it was or where it was going to go,
Sure.
but we knew it was special.
Right. So, hey, Christo, first single, I love it. Do you guys, have you been recording more music? Is there an EP or an LP coming up or more singles?
Yeah, so we've been in the studio. We've worked at quite a few different studios recently. We did a live session at Abbey Road in Studio 2, which is like a live EP. So like 6 or 7 songs there, which
Awesome.
was pretty incredible. Just to be in that room and play and record. And we didn't do any overdubs or anything, so we wanted to keep it completely raw and real with the mistakes and everything.
Nice.
Don't mess with it. So we'll be releasing
Mistakes.
and then we're releasing an EP before the end of the year and the album next year. So that's
Awesome.
kind of
So a lot going on, really.
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on.
And I'm sure it was epic recording at Abbey Road, just, as a Paul McCartney fan and a Sgt. Pepper fan and
Yeah,
a human being.
just generally,
Yeah.
just walking and go, wow.
Right.
Okay,
Just to get the
so
waft.
just
Yeah.
to get the waft, yeah, it was
And all the
incredible.
legends, all the ghosts in the room.
Taking it in.
all
and
No,
all the
really.
spirits
Yeah,
in the
you
room.
really
do.
It's like that,
It
yeah.
makes a difference. When
Yeah.
you're writing music, as being a musician yourself, that your surroundings kind of influence everything you do. So we were talking earlier about like different cities and stuff. Songs you write in LA are completely different to songs you write in London, or you record differently in different studios. The energy makes the vibe, everything that's happened before and everything that's happening there and then at that point, basically influences the sound, the whole thing, and that's that's
Yeah, I
something
imagine it
that
would have been
I-
amazing just feeling that energy, and I feel like it would probably elevate you as well. You're playing and you're playing in that room, and you're like,
You
I
step up, yeah.
better make John Lennon
Yeah.
proud,
Yeah, we were like,
He
we
might be
only want
watching
to do
right now,
7
yeah.
takes of this song, but no, we it was just very natural and cool and just
Great. So
enjoyed it.
we'll look out for the upcoming single and for the upcoming album.
Thanks,
next
guys.
year. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So our podcast also inspires aspiring musicians. And like Sean, he is a wonderful musician, but what advice do you have for the kids listening to their parents' vinyls, or just the kids that are watching YouTubes and trying to make music, or people that already have bands? Like,
Well,
what
for
advice?
for me, the main, like, the fucking 90%. Sorry, can I say fucking?
Yes, all the
anyway,
time.
the only way that I learned to play music was just playing along to the radio or playing along to records, and even when like a strange track comes on that it's not even your like genre or whatever, just like, fucking play along with that and keep it in your mind, and you can kind of grow with that. I think you put things in the bank somewhere.
Yeah,
You never you put it in the back of your mind. Put it in the bank, and you never know when you might need it.
I like that.
Yeah, that's great
I
advice.
just think, don't overthink it. Enjoy it. Just play. Don't try to be something. Don't try to copy anything.
Yeah, it
Just
should
do
be
your thing.
it should be enjoyable.
And
right?
keep that moment. Don't lose that, because that's what happens along the way. At some point, you will go through stages that you may forget why you picked up that instrument, and that's a great thing about Blitz Vega and working with Andy and stuff, because we've gone back to exactly what influenced us as kids, and this band's about kind of the same sort of things as my first band was about, which was just plug in and play and press record. Don't you know? And what happens happens.
And
People
also,
like it, they like it.
you can pick up a guitar just for pleasure, not as a career.
No, exactly. Yeah,
Because it's it's great.
yeah. It's a
Do it because
beautiful
you love
thing.
it, yeah.
Music is love, as they say.
It's love.
Bringing it back word.